Hello and welcome to episode 201 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we are declaring Call of Duty to be dead after being very optimistic and quite positive, at least for our standards last week. But we got some news to talk about that I think is very ironic considering what we talked about in our last episode. We also have a lot of CDL stuff to talk about, including the second week of the 2026 CDL season. And we might have a new rookie to talk about that could be maybe the face of the CDL in short order if things go to plan. Before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Big?
Doing all right. I think we've got a pretty good show lined up here. We got some juicy stuff to talk about. Like you said, the final week of online matches for 2025 just wrapped up yesterday. Um, got some interesting storylines and potential roster moves that we could discuss. And I didn't even see the other COD stuff for the actual game in MW4 that you mentioned, but you just tuned me into that about 10 minutes ago, and that's, like you said, really ironic considering what we talked about last episode. So if you didn't see last episode, you can go ahead, check that out after we talk about this stuff here, and should make for a good 1-2 punch.
Yeah, so if you did not watch last week, it was we literally just went through and we gave our kind of dissertations, if you want to call it that, about the CDL and COD. And we don't really have anything new on the CDL, but on December 13th, so that would have been on Saturday, the Ghost of Hope, who's done a lot of leaks and a lot of opinion stuff about Call of Duty, he posted that the next game, which is Modern Warfare 4, reportedly, and it will be developed by IW, which is something that we actually talked about, how COD doesn't, or Microsoft doesn't want COD to be back to back on the same titles, same brands. So no Black Ops back to back, no Modern Warfare back to back. But next game is supposed to be MW4, and according to the Ghost of Hope, it is a copy, and that was his direct quote, was a copy of MW2, except there will be no perk charging system, and the weapons will have the same amount of visual recoil as MW2. He also said that it's less ADS and slide penalties, so I think that's really interesting, and not in a good way, not a good interesting, very like negative and derogatory interesting. He said there was a ton of visual recoil on weapons in MW4, and he said it's pretty much a complete copy outside of a few little things. And we actually talked about this exact thing because if people remember, MW3, this latest MW3, was essentially a copy of MW2 in that the report at the time was that they weren't going to do a yearly release that year. It was going to be an MW2 expansion pack where there was going to be a massive update that you could pay whatever $20-$30 instead of like the full 60 or 70, and that would be the extent of the release that year. That changed. I'm sure somebody within Microsoft or Activision realized that was a really stupid idea, because they could just charge the full price for basically a carbon copy, and people would be maybe not okay with it, but they'd make enough money to make it okay. And that kind of seems to be what's going on here, even though it's been years. Like, there have been a few Black Ops games in between this, so it's not like a back-to-back where you could kind of understand that there's a lot of development that's going on with this current game, and then we have one next year, and that just makes it very difficult. There have been multiple games in between this now, and it feels like this is a really cheap shortcut, and
Yep.
I think it's going to backfire pretty badly, because that game is not like Black Ops 2 or like a COD 4, like one of these legendary games where people are like, I love it, just give me more of that. So I want to get your thoughts on this, this idea that we possibly could be seeing MW4, which is basically just MW2 and MW3, with some slight differences.
Yeah, this is very concerning. Definitely feels like an absolute punch in the face or slap in the face to the COD community. Um, Granted, like I said just a couple minutes ago, I didn't see any of this before. So this is literally like my instant reaction, gut reaction, very fresh take on all this. I haven't dove into it or anything like that. Um, but kind of like you were teeing it up as like, MW3 feeling like a DLC slash copy of MW2. That was the year after it. This year with Black Ops 7 potentially feeling a similar way to Black Ops 6 the year before makes a little sense. When there's a gap between this alleged reported of whatever copy of an MW2 game that it's not even the previous title, and they're just, and like you said, it's not even a COD game that's very highly regarded in the community or anything like that. It literally feels like the devs are like, what can we get away with? And this is something I've joked about, and we've maybe even brought it up on past shows before. But it's felt like over the years that it's like, the big joke for developers is like, what can we do this year to still sucker these people into giving us their money, even if we,
Mm-hmm.
we make all these changes that are unnecessary, and there's still thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are willing to pay $70, $80 a year to buy our game, even if we do stuff that um they don't like at the end of the day. Well, what can we being the devs, what can the devs get away with this year? It feels like that's like an ongoing joke, and whether
Mm-hmm.
it's actually true or not, I have no proof of, but that's what it feels like to me. And this would be like like the grand finale. I feel like in terms of like the devs sitting around a table being like, oh, I got a really good idea. What if we copy this game that everybody hated from several years ago and just release it as a full release and see how many people we can get to sucker into buying it this time?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't believe it. I really want to hope that this is fake news. I know Ghost of Hope is pretty reliable and has a pretty good track record, so I have no reason to not believe him. Um, but maybe it's just out of delusions of grandeur or something. But I really just want to not believe it because it feels like this is like just a really terrible decision if this is the route they go down. And who knows, maybe things are going to change. And we've heard there was, I don't even remember what game it was for, but there was something like there was a report a long time ago where it got close to the release of one of the games. It might have even been MW2, and they like scrapped like major elements of it, and then they were like, yeah, we can't release this, and they had to go in and retool a lot of things. It was whatever game didn't have a campaign, I think, because that's what like they put in a lot of time for the campaign, and like I don't remember. I
I
know
think it
that there
was
was reports that,
wasn't
and
didn't Vanguard not have campaign?
I don't remember. I haven't played a campaign and since
Yeah, I mean,
before AW, so I don't remember. But there have been instances, and even with like the MW3, it was reportedly going to be a DLC, and then that there was the PR campaign from Activision and stuff that came out being like, oh, that was never the case. We're always going to do a full reveal, full release, and then it feels like MW3 was just the DLC version, but they ended up making people pay full price for it. Um, so there's always going to be multiple sides to it, and it could very well be the case now that we get a PR campaign, maybe not soon, but like next year. That's like, this game isn't a copy of MW4. It has all these unique, things, blah blah blah, and then when the game drops, it literally feels like a copy of MW2. Also, the possibility that this negative backlash to this rumor and report uh, does have a potential impact on what the game looks like when it's released next year. So, um, I really, really, really want to not believe that the devs are going to go this far and give us a copy of MW2 for MW4. It just it feels like that would really be like a really terrible decision, especially given right now. I feel like Black Ops 7, and I feel like the community for the most part agrees with this, is one of the better Call of Duties in a while. and it seemingly is not doing well financially in the eyes of the higher ups or whatever, to elicit the response that we've gotten about not doing back-to-back MW and Black Ops titles or whatever, yada yada. Like, there are people discussing the financial viability of Black Ops 7 and the financial success of the game, despite it being an actually good game, one of the best in recent years, and a really fun game to play. I can only imagine if this game is struggling financially, allegedly, potentially, whatever, and then they do this reported MW2 copy to follow that up. I feel like that would have massive financial ramifications for Activision and the devs, and I feel like they have to know that, and if they don't, then I don't know what to say. So this is definitely very concerning, and I'm at a loss for words, to be honest.
So kind of to follow up on that last point where you said they have to know, Ghost of Hope had tweeted a few days prior to this report and said that reportedly Microsoft believes that BO7 is a good game, but the financial performance is below expectations, which were lowered last year after BO6, quote unquote, fell off a cliff. With the state of the franchise overall, the pressure is now on Call of Duty to change its model. Microsoft wants to see Call of Duty overall move toward a smoother revenue stream and a reduced expenditure pattern. Microsoft has also supposedly told higher-ups within Call of Duty that changes are very much required, and nothing is off the table, including studio mergers and a complete rethink of monetization models within the franchise. So when they say smoother revenue stream, that means no yearly releases, because that's the spike. Like if you're looking at like how Call of Duty makes their money, every October, November, there's a massive spike in their revenue, and then it, I'm sure gradually falls off, or probably like very steeply falls off like after December, because people aren't buying it for Christmas or anything. So the smoother revenue would be no yearly releases. We're going to put out a game every, like maybe it's every 2 to 3 years or 4 years, and we're going to kind of let this game be tweaked a lot over the years. We're going to try to put out new season releases and try to make it different every few months, even though it's still the same game, which again, we talked about that. Like that's not a bad idea, and it would definitely change how competitive esport or competitive COD works, because right now we've been on the yearly model since the beginning of competitive gaming, really. So I'd be interested in that, but the studio mergers should have people kind of perking their ears up a little bit. I think, I mean, it would make the most sense if Sledgehammer went to Sledgehammer and IW merged, because Sledgehammer and Treyarch are the better developers, and IW has been really bad for a really long time, and they need as much help as they can get. I don't believe that Treyarch and IW would ever come together, because those are like the two well-known, most like established studios. So yeah, it's kind of a weird thing to think about, but I think it's not great. Like I don't really know. Like we talked about it last week, and we were not super pessimistic about it. But we've talked for years about how, especially for us as people that are more focused on the competitive side of COD than they are about COD itself, that the way that we see it moving forward is that you make a competitive game, or a game that could be kind of tweaked into a very good esport, and then people will just play that game. I don't really understand why there's so much pushback about that, and why they feel like they need to cater to like the lowest common denominator, when if you look at Fortnite is a really, really difficult game. Like that game is pretty much impossible for casual players, and yet it became the biggest game in the world for at least a time period. I know like there's like a skill gap, but that's kind of what Call of Duty, that's how every esport wants, is like, yes, it can be nice for the people that just kind of, show up on the weekends and they play with their friends from high school or whatever. Like that's cool. But then there's a kind of a skill gap that just, you can go up and up and up and up and up. And then, in Fortnite, those guys are insane. Like if I played a pro player, I would be like, I don't want to play this game anymore. And that's kind of what Call of Duty should be looking to do. And I don't know, it just, it seems like a really stupid thing that they're doing with this MW4 stuff, and I think it's gonna, like you said, it's probably gonna be pretty bad for them in terms of the financial part of it, because it's not like Modern Warfare, like the brand, has any sort of cachet or relevance uh, in modern day. Like, COD itself is not nearly as invulnerable as it used to be. Even though every time there's a COD killer, whether it be X Defiant or Battlefield or what was that, 1944, that World War II game. Every game that's ever come out, like, I just don't think that that's a COD killer. The COD killers are the Fortnites and the CSGOs and the League of Legends. It's the other great games that have just been able to stick together, and they might not be like super COD competitive.
No, maybe the real COD killer is this MW4 game. That'd
Well,
be
yeah.
pretty funny.
I mean, Activision was the COD killer all along, and
Yeah, that'd be no, but bringing up Fortnite, I think Fortnite has made changes over the years to make, like, I haven't had Fortnite downloaded on my PlayStation for a while now. I feel pretty confidently that I could re-download Fortnite and just go into a random lobby and get a win within like an hour. They have made changes to be like, there are a lot more. I don't know if this has changed recently, but back when I was still playing a little bit, they made changes where they added bots to the
Mhm.
100-player lobbies, and they made the casual lobbies in Fortnite a little easier. But at the end, if you're making it to those end circles, you are going to be running into those kids who are, if you're playing builds, if you're playing no builds, this doesn't matter. But if you're playing with builds enabled in that mode, there's going to be those sweaty kids who are just
Mhm.
cranking 90s and building, skyscrapers in 2.2 seconds, and I'm never going to be able to do that. I never was, even when I was playing Fortnite all the time. I was not a builder. And that's the interesting element to me of Fortnite, and thinking of it from a competitive aspect. That's where the difference comes between someone casually just going into a game and getting a win versus somebody who's absolutely just dominating kids and uh you know able to do that stuff that takes it to the next level. And in COD, there really isn't something like that. Like, even when we look at uh, the the best players in the CDL, we all say, like, when new guys are picked up and stuff, that a lot of people can shoot straight and shoot really well, but it's like the timings and the knowledge of spawns, especially for respawn, obviously, and stuff like that. That's where the skill gap comes in more, as opposed to, like, there's no building mechanic or COD or something that, I guess this year it'll be like the movement with the wall bounce and stuff. Whoever is able to find the best little tricks here and there with the wall jumps, and maybe take that to the next level. That's where that true skill gap will start to develop. I feel like for Black Ops 7 at least. But at the end of the day, we've said it before, the devs are not like making decisions in terms of competitive. So they don't, frankly, it feels like they don't give a shit about, like, this, like, skill gap or whatever we're talking about. They are targeting these people who, like I was saying, for Fortnite, just hop on, try to get a win with their friends from high school. The people who, for Call of Duty, are hopping in a TDM on Nuketown for an hour with some of their friends and shooting the shit. Like, that's who they're going after. And it's not until those people are starting to get frustrated is potentially we're going to see some, like, drastic changes, I feel like. And I feel like if we're going down this reported route of MW4 being a copy of MW2, that might be the first, like, real shot to those more casual players, because I really don't know if there's anybody who really truly liked that MW2 game, besides maybe the people who were winning tournaments for the CDL and making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe they're, like, able to stomach it a little bit. But from a casual perspective, I don't even remember playing that many pubs in that game. But there wasn't zombies, so I don't even really remember what I was doing for that. I mean, maybe I was still playing GBs at that point, but yeah, I mean, this is just I don't know where I'm going now. I'm really flustered over this.
Well, I think I don't have a problem with them saying, "Hey, we want to get these like the 40-year-old dudes who they just get on and they don't really pay attention to anything about Call of Duty. They just want to have fun and get off the game on Sunday night and then they'll get back on Saturday night or Friday night or whatever. Like I'm fine with that, but why couldn't Call of Duty funnel them into ranked play and say like we want to shift you into that where you can play with a group, you can play with 3 other friends and you can basically create a team and you just play other 4-man teams for 4 hours and then you get off the game. Like, and there is something to work toward. Like in public matches, like it's all about like ranking up and prestiging and all that stuff, which is fine. But like, why couldn't you do that for competitive players, and why couldn't you try to funnel some of these casual players into that competitive model where it's not like, oh, we're going to really restrict you. We're just trying to make you into quote unquote a better player. We're trying to give you a better experience, a more competitive experience, and you can play against people your own skill level, because if you're really, really bad, the lack of skill-based matchmaking is not going to really matter at all, because you're still going to get absolutely shit on by most of the people playing the game. So I just think this is the best way forward. And just to elaborate on what I was saying about like Call of Duty doesn't really have that kind of like cultural relevance anymore. Like there is certainly, it's just going to be a part of like American culture, is like people know what Call of Duty is, people know what trick shotting is, people know certain players that are very famous from Call of Duty, like a Scump or a Nade Shot, like sure. But if you look at Twitch right now, and granted it's 3:30 on a Monday, it's there's no holiday or anything, but between Warzone and Black Ops 7, there are 42,000 people watching Call of Duty right now on Twitch. That would be behind 17 other games, I believe, or 15 other games. Valorant, Escape from Tarkov, Counter-Strike, World of Warcraft, Fortnite, etc., etc. Like, that's kind of crazy, is it not? That, like, Warzone used to be kind of the biggest thing in the world for a bit, and that doesn't really have the relevance that it used to. The regular Call of Duty game definitely does not, if you look back even, like, 5 years ago. So what are you going to do? What are you going to change? What are you going to do better? And they just said last week or 2 weeks ago that they were going to innovate, and it wasn't going to be incremental, and that it was going to be meaningful innovation. What the fuck are you innovating if you copy the game that you made like 5 years ago? Like, what is the logic in that? Like, what are you going to do that is going to be any sort of innovation if you are just taking a game that would, like, you're basically taking Modern Warfare 3 and copying that, because Modern Warfare 3 was a copy of Modern Warfare 2. So hopefully you're not going back to the thing that you were supposed to be improving on, and then you're like, actually, we didn't improve on it with MW3, so we're going to go back to MW2. Like, what the hell are they doing? And there's no sense in it. We can only hope that they figure something out and they're able to kind of salvage what is supposed to come next November or whatever, October, November. But this is kind of late in the process. They've had years to do this, and to say that they're going to be able to turn around in less than 9 or 10 months and make some kind of good game out of it, I just don't believe them even in the slightest. And I wouldn't believe them if they said that MW4 is completely different from MW2 and MW3, because MW 2019 sucked, MW2 sucked, MW3 sucked. Like, what are we talking about? They all suck. And like, IW sucks. They've sucked for a long time. Their last like good game was like the real MW3, and people hated that game at the time too. So like there's not a lot of people that are going to be standing up and beating the drum of IW, and they don't deserve it. And I think they're going to prove exactly why everyone was right in October, November of 2026. So maybe we'll do a state of the Call of Duty next year around this time, and maybe we'll have different opinions. I don't know. Maybe they'll salvage it, but it seems quite unlikely. Let's move on to the CDL stuff, though, because we do have a few CDL plus Challenger stuff. This is like the 3rd or 4th straight week that we've talked about Challengers, which is, I don't know, something in the water, I guess. As far as the CDL, though, Blackheart is going to be back for the 3rd week of the CDL, which will be in 4 or 5 weeks from now after the break. But of course, Blackheart had been removed not only from competitive, but just from the game overall because of some game breaking bug that not everyone could not play it just because of that, which was very, very unusual. But the CDL tweeted on December 12th that due to the timing of Blackheart being re-added to the map pool, it will not be used for CDL or Challengers competitions this weekend, which was this past weekend, but the map will return to competitive play starting with Week 3 qualifiers and Challengers Cup 3. So that's really good news. What do you think about all of this, considering we did say that there was a chance if it was going to come back, it would probably be sometime in this break?
Yeah, I think this at the end of the day makes the most sense, and honestly, it's gonna feel like for especially you and me, like some of the challengers teams and the pro teams did scrim it before this whole issue popped up and whatever. Um, so it's not gonna feel like that for them, but for viewers who haven't seen the map or people who haven't played the map or whatever, it's gonna basically feel like after the Christmas break, a new map has been added to the map pool, and that's what happened last year with Hacienda. It was added after uh, the holiday break last year and was immediately one of the best competitive maps in uh, Black Ops 6. I'm not saying that for Blackheart is potentially going to be, and it's only for Hardpoint right now that it could, but it'll be a bit of a breath of fresh air in terms of having a new experience for some of the viewers and people who haven't gotten to play or watch competitive on that map yet. Um, so yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Players will get a couple weeks now to test out whatever the big changes were or anything like that on the map since it was removed and re-added. And we'll go from there because we did already get confirmation before that none of the new maps added with Season 1 were going to be added before uh, Major 1 anyway. So this will just basically be like a little bonus getting this map back when we do.
Yeah, I'm more just interested to see what kind of maps come in after Major 1,
Yeah,
if any.
definitely.
But it's great to at least have 5 hardpoint maps. That's kind of the key here, especially for the major. Just I think it
Yep.
would be interesting, and we talked about like the effect of having one less hardpoint map in the rotation for some of these teams. Granted, it only happened for like a week, so we didn't really get like a huge sample size of, for this, but. Yeah, it would probably change quite a bit, I think, if we had gone through the rest of the qualifiers and even into the major with only 4 hardpoint maps. As far as challengers goes, the Huntsman defeated Telluride Bush. Obviously, that's TJ's team. I think it's pretty interesting. Obviously, I think Renegade is on that team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And people are pretty excited for him. He's a Halo pro that's come over and trying his hand at challengers. But the North American Cup champions were Fellows team, Omit Brooklyn. So that's Nate, Fellow, Brack, and Alluka. So Omit Brooklyn won 4-2 against Falcons Academy White, against RC's King of Bodhi, Paul X, and Priesta. So 4 former CDL pros. In the grand finals, again, Omit Brooklyn wins 4-2. In the 6 maps, Alluka had 114 kills, which was the most on his team, third most in the lobby behind Priesta, who had dropped 121, which is like, what's going on there? And then King of Bodhi, which he had 116. And I only saw a little bit, like I was telling you in the pre-show, I only saw a little bit of the Alluka hype. I guess you're like fully in the tank for Alluka. So what's the deal around him? The excitement seems to be kind of quite severe for this guy.
I mean, this really just came out of nowhere. It feels like, but yeah, I'm pretty sure for the first cup that Fellows team was playing with Eric Boom, and then they decided to replace Eric Boom with this Alluka kid. And if you guys listening or watching this haven't seen anything from him, just go and search Alluka on Twitter. There are a ton of clips mostly some of Dashy watching his POV and just absolutely being in awe. And he was like, Dashy's like, yeah, I got to get this kid's AR class because he's absolutely frying. And with Dashy saying that, it's like legit. There is the chance that Dashy could just be playing into the bit a little bit and trolling, but it seemed at least partially genuine in my opinion, where he was just pretty impressed by this kid. I saw clips of Octane uh, reacting and saying the kid's gross, and there's a bunch of stuff, and there's even clips of Aches telling Scrap that LAT gotta, make the move and get LAT Alluka in the CDL. But we'll talk about that later. I just think it's very rare where somebody can seemingly come out of nowhere and make an impression so quickly like this, and the fact that it's basically happened now twice within maybe a 6 month span, because of course I'm referring to Mercules being the first one.
Mhm.
He seemingly came out of nowhere last year and wins world championship and MVP at champs with Optic, and now there's potentially a a second hidden gem here with Alluka that could, in theory, be the next Mercules, which is just a crazy thing to even think about, because we don't even know what Mercules really is at this point, because he's hasn't even played a full season in the CDL. But it's just a weird thing to think about, and honestly, like the thing I was telling you beforehand, like even before the grand finals, a 4 map best of 5 series against Geo, Awakening, Two Real, and Yuli, who are all players who have played in the CDL at some point. Some of those names have played more than others, but um, against 4 players who were in the CDL, Alluka had 133 kills in 4 maps, a 1.75 KD, went 133 and 76. The next highest in that series was Geo with 93. So this kid is just frying at this point, and do have to pump the brakes a little bit. It's one online cup in challengers, one online tournament. Um, but you think back to Mercules, he got that one chance on LAN, and it was skyrocketed to the stratosphere right after that. Maybe that's all this kid needs now is one chance. He is apparently 18 and from Germany, allegedly, potentially, I believe. So it could be some language barriers. The clips I saw, he seemed to be speaking like mostly fine English. It clearly wasn't his first language, in my opinion, but I mean, it was understandable to me, and I have a problem with European accents and having a tough time understanding some if they're very thick accents. So, um, this is just a very exciting. Even if nothing comes of this, I am now all in on Alluka and very interested to see where he takes things from here.
Yeah, so he was kind of reposting a lot of like his in CDL Intel was tweeting about him, how he had like 41 kills in that I think it was the winners finals against Two Real and Geo and Awakening and Yuli. So he had 41 kills, 5,000 damage in that match or in that map. He had another 40 kills, 46 kills in the same series against the same team. So yeah, that series he had a 1.75 KD. Like that's just kind of ridiculous. Like how many times is that actually going to happen? Even in a challengers level, like those are former pros, and his team has everybody in that lobby except Alluka and Nate, who apparently is also 18. Those are the only non former pros in that lobby, and he's dropping 1.75 KD. So, I mean, we we just talked about it not that long ago that like every few years we get like this young like 18, 19-year-old guy who's just born to play Call of Duty, and we got it with Mercules. We've gotten it with Hydra and Simp, and maybe Alluka is the next one up, because if you look at his COD Gamepedia, like he didn't join a team before the Fishers College team in August, and then he joined Omit Brooklyn this month in December, and he only has 6 COD results on his God Gamepedia. So he has like a bunch of Checkmate and COD Agent and like a Frag Cup 5 COD Agent qualifier, and then his first Challengers event was the North America Cup, the first one last weekend. He played with Phantoms, a former CDL pro as well. And then this week they win with Brackfellow and Nate. So, I mean, that's like a pretty historic rise. I'm I'm assuming that no one is like questioning whether he's a hacker because that's usually how it goes. Like there's like a rite of
Uh,
passage
yeah.
and especially with challengers like not having the greatest track record. And I'm not saying anything about this specific guy, but like we've seen over the years, even with guys that have been to LAN and have had success on LAN, there's still like a question of like what's going on here. Like there's something fishy. I'm surprised to see nobody say that about him just based on how great of a weekend he had. So
I'm not gonna lie. When I was seeing the clips, I was like looking to see if anyone was saying it, and I didn't really see anything. But it was a thought that crossed my mind. Was like, are people gonna start accusing this kid of hacking? And I really haven't seen it. That is interesting. Other interesting aspect is you mentioned Fisher College. That is where my grandma went to college. So I am more fully in on Alluka than I even thought I was before we started recording this.
I'm fairly sure that they have like a pretty good like Call of Duty team. I've recognized the name and I'm yeah. So at least during according to COD Gamepedia, 3 players are on their active roster. Phantoms, Alluka, and Nate are on the Fishers College team. I'm pretty sure they're like I don't know if they have like an online system, but I think there's like because their former players include Ramby, Gunsey, Druxy, Rex, Silly, Darkside, and Brack.
Hmm.
So that seems to be something. And I think I follow the guy who's like their GM, or I used to follow him or something. So I think they're kind of deep in the tank for like esports, like college esports, and
Interesting.
seems to be almost like a little Alabama brewing in Boston. So
All I'll say though too on the Alluka front is we can talk more about it when we talk about LAT's match, but like we talked maybe a couple weeks ago about the nade shot, like just mentioning offhand, like, yeah, this is the last year of Hydra's and Scrap's contracts, and I'm gonna have to see what I can do to resign. But like, they could get the bag thrown at them from Falcons, or maybe they get an optic offer, yada yada. Like one thing you can do if you as need shot slash 100 thieves see this stuff and believe in him early on, investing in an 18-year-old kid like this and pairing him with Hydra and Scrap is like, if he is the truth, like that's really cool. But like, even taking it a step further, you could potentially invest in this kid very early on now and set yourself up where in a world Hydra and Scrap leave, you got this kid sitting in the back. And I'm not saying like you hold him hostage or something from other CDL offers, but like at the worst, you could sign him as like a sub and like potentially get him on a deal where he's signed for next season, and then you have him as an option, uh, going forward. But I think if this kid keeps frying like this, he's gonna be swimming in CDL offers. I feel like.
and in the EU Challengers Cup, Kix's team, which was an all Saudi team. So what? How did you say the D7 like Vrooms?
Oh, jeez. I think it's Dahum.
The home, and then there's like a Dahome because there's
Yeah.
a
I,
which I hope they're brothers because if not, like one of them's got to change their name. Um, and then there's Kicks, obviously former Falcons player as well, and Rolled, I think is how you say it. So they went by Rock Esports and they beat Clutch Rain, which was a French team or like a French speaking team. Brezzy, Cobra, Linz, and Melko in the grand finals. It went to Game 7 and went to round 11, Game 7, which is pretty
mm,
crazy. Our boy Steve Vortex is the coach of that Saudi team.
that's what. Yeah, that's what I caught my attention was Vortex is the coach, and that this is obviously Kicks, who was a name that was a part of the All Saudi roster for Falcons last year, but now it's on Rock Esports, which is another, according to their Twitter bio, just a Saudi esports club. Um, so I found that interesting. Like we obviously have never really found out the deal with Kicks other than him taking that leave of absence or whatever last year, but now he's playing again on a different Saudi team, so that's a little interesting. But I thought he was one of the few Falcons players last year early on that stood out, and finding success in challengers on the EU side of things. That good for him, and will be interesting to see how things work out for his new squad there.
When is our boy Cobra getting a chance in the CDL?
I really thought this was going to be the year, but who knows?
Is he's 25, so older than I thought, but
Really? Wow.
he's been like one of the top European
Yeah.
challenger players for like 3 or 4 years now. So
And we've seen, most notably with Afro last year, the problem from the outside looking in is visas holding up European prospects from getting mid-season CDL
yeah,
opportunities. So it's really, if somebody wants Hydra, if somebody wants Cobra, um, like to even consider him, they have to start submitting that paperwork like yesterday to try and get him for mid-season. So uh, tough situation for him, but I obviously have said it multiple times. I would like to see him in the CDL at some point.
let's get into these matches. So, second week of the CDL, the final week of 2025. We'll be back in 2026 with more qualifying matches. But we started on Friday, December 12th, with the Carolina Royal Ravens and the Riyadh Falcons. We both picked the Falcons, and we were both like, well, I think we both picked them in 2 matches this week. And that's usually not a good sign. The first one went according to plan. They swept Carolina. They beat them, not like super convincingly, but it was not like a incredibly close series, even in the individual maps. First win for this roster for Falcons. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I thought especially map one on Colossus, we saw this a little bit. It could be a result of Blackheart not being in the pool,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like we've been seeing a lot of Colossus hard point, and I feel like this week in particular, where you're seeing several teams experiment with more SMGs on the map on Colossus. It definitely is one of the smaller maps, so it makes sense to me. But I think I went on this tangent last year with LAG and Priesta, and when I was ranting and raving about them playing Skyline more because it got Priesta on a third SMG, and it felt like that was allowing. That was when it was still Skies, Lins, Priesta, and I did I say Skies? I meant Kismet, Lins,
Yeah.
Priesta on the SMGs with Skies. Um, and playing on a smaller map like seemed to work more for that team because it allowed them to have more SMGs. I feel like that could be a recipe for success for Falcons because that's something I've talked about with that Kismet pickup as their fourth. We have seen Kismet over the years what he can do with an SMG. Putting him on an AR just doesn't feel right to me. Yes, I believe he can do it at times, but like him being the bulldog, running around, setting up pred, that was how I envisioned this things working for this Falcons roster, and a map like Colossus could, in theory, allow pred, Exnid, and Kismet to all be on an SMG and just run around causing havoc, and Celium holding stuff down with an AR. So that seems like that could be something we'll keep an eye on with this Falcons team if they want to keep continuing to play Colossus. There were even points I think Celium was using an SMG on this map too, because I saw some comments about that. Um, so yeah, I think especially for that first map, if that's a recipe for success, maybe we see Falcons continuing to play on Colossus, and in turn, maybe some opponents coming up decide to veto Colossus against Falcons and force them on these maps that make Kismet play that second AR. So that could be a little, a tug of war there that we'll have to keep an eye on. But yeah, overall, felt like this was, you know, especially compared to their first couple matches, which were against better teams. Um, this felt like a return to form for Celium. We'll talk more about Celium later on because there naturally Celium controversy in his other match. Um, but statistically played pretty well. Falcons guys all positive, Carolina guys all negative. Just tough start for Carolina. not much else to say, but we felt like this was a must-win match very early on for Falcons, and they got a 3-0, so good for them.
Next match, G2 Minnesota versus the Boston Breach. And what do you know? Minnesota going to Game 5 once again. They get reverse swept in this series by Boston. They win Colossus Hardpoint, what you were just talking about, 250 to 247. They win map 1. They dominate Raid S&D 6-1. And then they lose Scar Overload, Scar Hardpoint, and Den Search and Destroy 6-3, which was also Minnesota's first S&D loss, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, not. Did they beat Optic in S&D?
No, they won the map 1.
So they won the two S&Ds in their first series against Cloud9. They win the first S&D of this series, and then they lose Game 5 to Boston, which my Breach boys, look at them. They're rocking and rolling. We'll get to their second match, which maybe not rocking and rolling as hard, but any, I guess, concern about Minnesota here? I think we both think, like, for both of these teams, this is a winnable match for either of them.
Yes.
And this could be a really key match when it gets down to the winner's bracket and who might be in the loser's bracket. So overall thoughts on Boston's 3-2 win here?
Very surprised. I definitely, especially the way it started, banger first one map into a convincing search and destroy win. I thought this was done and dusted. If not a 3-0, maybe a 3-1 from G2. And then, new season, same old Minnesota with their Game 5s and reverse sweeps. And, last year it was Minnesota forcing the Game 5s, but then losing 3-2. But there's another 3-2 loss, just in a different way. I really don't know what to say. It just doesn't make a ton of sense that, especially after the first two maps, that, G2 weren't able to close it out, but hey, credit to Boston. They were resilient. Snoopy, in particular, played really well. Maps 3 and 5 was a big catalyst for them pulling off this reverse sweep, and Nasty played pretty well last two maps as well. So just overall, this is, maybe this is more of a testament to that, like, middle of the pack, or like, the 5 through 8 spots, or maybe even like the 7 through 8 spots in the standings. Like, maybe this is an indicator that that's going to be more of a closely contested, hard fought battle in the standings throughout the year, which I'm all for. I like when, what we've had in years past where, there are those champ spots up for grabs, and it's making, some of the matches that otherwise people wouldn't really care about. It's making those more entertaining and interesting to anticipate and watch. So, yeah, I pretty confused how this went wrong for G2 after a strong start, and especially just the way map 1 ended. Like, you would have felt like the way map 1 ended, leading into a dominant map 2 performance, you could feel like I wouldn't have been shocked if Boston got swept, just because it felt like all momentum was on G2, and then Boston was just able to flip a switch and pick up a big win. So shout out them.
It's kind of just, these are the teams that we expect each to be. Is like, Boston is typically like outmuscled and doesn't have the same kind of talent typically of some of these other teams, and then they just somehow win these matches and they claw back into series. And I like, it's not a huge upset or anything, but it definitely, I think most people probably picked Minnesota going into this match, and it's just like, that's a series that Boston will win. They probably have, like, if you look at all the CDL, they probably have the most upsets of any team in the league. So credit to them. Minnesota, they have a lot of these matches where, like, a lot last year especially, where you're like, how did you lose this? Why did you lose this? And hopefully that is not a trend as we move forward into the season. Final match on Friday is the continuing of a trend, and I want to loop in Vancouver's second match of the week, if we could, with this conversation, because it's pretty much like the same exact thing. Toronto sweeps Vancouver 3-0. The only close map was the S&D, which went to round 11. Toronto wins on Den. 21 combined kills for Gwyn and Abe in the loss. And then in the second match, that was on, I believe, Saturday. That was the final match on Saturday, and C9 beat Vancouver 3-0 there. That one was closer throughout the series, but still another 3-0 loss for Vancouver. So I want to start with them. They are now 0-9 in map count this season. Granted, they have played two of probably the top 5 teams in the league in Paris and Toronto, and then they played Cloud9 as well, which I don't think that they're one of the top 5 teams, but we talked about it before the season, even before this match, that Cloud9 has a ton of experience and Vancouver has very, very little in comparison. Is this worse, better, about the same as what you were expecting of Vancouver going into the season? If I told you after 2 weeks in the CDL that they had not won a map, would that be something that would, surprise you at all?
Without knowing who they were playing against, I'd probably say yes. I'd probably say they'd at least win a map or two. Given the breakdown, like you said, playing against Paris and Toronto, definitely not surprised that they were dominated by both of those teams. And I will give them credit that, like you said, the Cloud9 series was closer despite them not winning a single map there, but individual games were close. And I mean, like you said, the search really comes down to one round there in the round 11 against Toronto. It's just a tough spot. I've seen a lot of stuff. I think I even saw a clip of Formal reacting to comments on Legend, like already COD kids like calling for
Yeah.
Legend's head. He needs to be replaced and stuff. And it's a tough situation because I think Formal was, paraphrasing here, it was something like, if you're not Mercules and frying right away, like everyone's going to be,
Yeah.
gang piling on you and
Purge was like that when he was with Vegas. Like, people basically were like, "You're the worst player in the world," and then he's still in the CDL like 3 years later.
Yeah. So this is the thing we talked about with Vancouver. Like, if they are willing to let an 0-9 start lead to immediate roster changes and a benching of Legend and stuff, like, then the whole experiment with trying to develop these guys just makes no sense at the end of the day. So I don't know. I think it's been a rough start. I said this was to be expected. I felt like it was going to be tough for them to, you know, get out to a strong start, especially given Legend's lack of experience in competitive Call of Duty. But there have been some signs of hope, especially Gwyn's performance. He's showing, at least to me, he can be a guy who, regardless of the players around him, he can put up numbers. We've seen it over the years, whether he's playing with other veterans or playing with, I said others there, thinking Gwyn's a veteran. I hate myself for saying that. Playing with veterans or playing with other players who are, younger, it's Gwyn is able to produce numbers, and that is something that that goes a long way in terms of showing that Gwyn is a mainstay here in the CDL. He can get it done no matter who's around him, and he should be considered, one of those guys who's sticking around no matter what. It's going to be finding the right recipe around him to find success, and I think right now Vancouver is just in that position where the success isn't coming, but it doesn't mean they have to abandon ship right now. They have, if you believed enough in Legend's talent to give him a starting CDL spot without any previous competitive Call of Duty experience, you cannot let this start derail that notion.
Yeah, he's played 3 matches as a pro in Call of Duty, because the preseason stuff doesn't count like at all. So he's played 3 matches. I'm sure many pros, or like really successful pros, if you look at their first 3 pro matches, it was probably did not go well for many of them.
Shotzi, first match on Dallas Empire against Chicago Huntsman.
Yeah, and Shotzi was like much more hyped up. Like, he is, I mean, he ended up winning MVP of that season, but like the start was not great, and people definitely let him know about that, especially because they were playing real optic. But But Legend right now, he ranks 48th out of 48th in terms of KD in the CDL. He has a .72. Lunars, which he's in his second year, he has the fourth worst KD with .85. And if you look at this is all according to Breaking Point, shout out to them. And if you look at their Slayer rating on Breaking Point, Gwyn has the number one overall Slayer rating, which is like hardpoint kills per 10 minutes, S&D kills per round, and control kills per 10 minutes. He has the highest at 101.13, and that is above Ghosty and Snoopy and Crimp and Mercules and Simp and Joe Deceives, who are the rest of the top 7. So I think that kind of shows like where they're at. Like Gwyn is statistically the best Slayer in the CDL right now, and he just so happens to have 2 players at least on his team that are kind of working through some things in that department, and it's resulted in this really poor start, which we expected it. I think we both said like they have to kind of stick it out until the after Major 2 is like the earliest that it really needs to change, unless there's kind of like a mutiny within the team and they need to change it from that point of view. But as far as the results go, I would assume, I hope that like Ricky Atora was, he knew what he was getting into, and that he knows like this is going to take some time, especially for Legend, like of the team just in general. He needs the most time and the most reps out of all of them. So I hope that they don't kind of panic and do something that they might end up regretting down the road. Saturday, December 13th, you want to talk about some regret. I think one team should have quite a bit of regret, and that is Nadeshot's Los Angeles Thieves. And I say Nadeshot because I personally blame him for our boy Dan Ghosty being on the Paris Gentlemates. And I don't blame him for that because, I'm rocking with the Gentlemates right now, but he should blame himself. He should tweet that tweet that he sent out last year, but he should do it about himself. Like, how could I be so stupid? I need to get back into the game. I need to not get off of my calls, my financial calls for the next 4 weeks until we can get this team back in order. Because the Paris Gentlemates were absolutely frying, absolutely cooking the LA Thieves in their series head-to-head. A revenge match, obviously, for not only Ghosty, but Dylan Envoy. LAT just did not look even remotely close to Paris, which we talked about before because we saw these two teams play in the preseason, and it was pretty clear from there, like Paris did look to be much better than LA Thieves. And this time it was like very, very clear. Ghosty drops 38 and 13 in the opening map, almost 100-point clubs LAT. Sib goes 12 and 3 in the S&D, a 6-3 win for Paris, and then an 8-1 overload for Paris. And Ghosty and Sib both drop 30. Kenny goes 13 and 31, so like he had almost the exact opposite scoreline as the other two. And I what is it, Schadenfreude, like where you're just like reveling in like everything that's coming to roost basically. And that was me over the weekend when I looked on Twitter after this game, and I hope Kenny just deleted his internet completely because it was not kind to him. If I was Dan Ghosty, I'm going right to Twitter because that had to be the best feeling in the world, especially going on Twitter and just seeing people gash you up for hours and hours on end. Were you as happy for our boy Dan Ghosty as I was?
Oh yeah, that had to feel real good. And I think that's I put it in the tweet when I tweeted out our links for this episode of the podcast, and I put it in the notes too. Like, it's got to be at least a discussion. We can dive into a little bit here, or maybe we can save it for when we got the month break coming up and we can dive into it more. But at least posing the question of, is dropping Ghosty just a roster move that LAT is going to regret, or is it like one of the worst roster moves for the franchise? And they've made a lot of moves over the years, so might be worth more of a deep dive. But at the end of the day, Ghosty is definitely making his former teammates in Hydra and Scrap at least reconsider. Like, they got to be thinking like, damn, what were you thinking, like letting this guy go? It definitely at the end of the day could work out in LAT's favor if they go on to have a really successful year and win champs, win a couple majors, whatever the case may be. and so then we'll look back on some of these early matches and be like, oh, it didn't really matter at the end of the day. But immediate reaction to multiple showdowns here between this Gentlemate squad and LA Thieves, and Gentlemates have had their number very early. Um, so it's going to have to translate to continued success, and especially for someone like Neptune, who wasn't able to get that championship last year despite making multiple finals, like they are going to have to win a championship for it to, really mean something, whether it's against LAT or not. Like, if go, I bet Ghosty would even say it. Like, beating LAT in regular season matches is cool, but he would probably much rather win multiple championships, whether it's against LAT or not. Um, so yeah, it's a weird spot where these early matches against them had to have mean something, and obviously, he's dropping a 2.14 KD for the series against these guys. Like he had to have some extra motivation going into it. But yeah, we're just gonna have to see how it all plays out in the long run, because if LAT turns around and starts smoking Gentlemates, then this is all just a moot point. So yeah, I think early on I am definitely all in on Ghosty. I'm very happy for him and this whole Gentlemate squad. I like all the guys there. Sid played really well in this series too. Uh, just definitely, he drops a 1.45 KD, and it's, not even close to the top KD of the series because of how insane Ghosty was. So yeah, I think, this is the one. You see Kenny having a stinker here. That's where it starts making you think if LAT Alluka is going to be the move. I was really surprised last year when we had the whole, the Pred move
Yeah.
a week into the season. I feel like I would be surprised if LAT actually pulled the trigger and made a move 2 weeks into the season, but who knows? Like you said, maybe Nadeshot's just like, yeah, screw this. We got to abort and make a drastic move here. So that is definitely a very interesting spot to be in, and I am excited for, even if it's just like rumors and stuff on stream over the next couple weeks where not much is going on. I'm excited to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, something to think about with the Alluka stuff is, like you said, he was an AR too, and we talked so much over the offseason about, like, there aren't very many ARs in the league, especially like really top tier ones, and that's why dropping Ghosty was so crazy to me. Was like every team in the league aside from basically Optic would be like, yeah, give me Ghosty. Like, he's the guy that could help us. I said for Toronto specifically over the offseason, I was like, if you replaced Insight with Ghosty, like, you could probably be like a champs contender going into the season. Even if the roles are still kind of messy, it's like the amount of talent that he brings is pretty insane. And for LAT to let him go, bring in Kenny, who we talked about, it's like a gigantic risk. Like, Kenny's never been a risk in his career. He's always been the guy who's like, yeah, let's go get Kenny. That makes a ton of sense. But now he came off the worst season of his pro career. And again, we're 3 matches in. They were 2-0 going into this match. They didn't have a second match this week, so he didn't get to like redeem himself and come back and drop like a 1.1 or anything. But it does make you wonder, like, what happens. And with the Alluka part is like, what if other teams kind of jump on it right now, like over this break, and LAT is kind of hemming and hawing about whether we should drop Kenny. And by the time that they come to a decision and maybe they say like, yeah, we probably should, he's not there anymore. Like, what if Alluka goes to, let's say, a Toronto, just for example, or any other team that really wants him, and now LAT's kind of stuck where they are with their roster. And I think that's probably what's going to happen, to be quite honest. And that's why I was not as I wasn't as high on LAT coming into the year, as probably a team with this much talent and this much success has. I just didn't think that they would be that kind of team. But they'll have a chance to prove it after the break. I do wonder if Nadeshot's like a weird guy. So like, just lingering, like that was the last like Call of Duty moment that he's had, or a CDL moment. And I think that just being like, maybe we should do something over this break. I think that might be an option. Next up, we had Optic versus Miami, which was a really exciting match. Obviously, we've been talking about Miami a lot and like how they would look because Trakes looked kind of wishy-washy or hot and cold, if you want to put it like that, in his first week as a CDL pro. And I would say there was more of that again in this week, especially in this opening map. He only drops 15 kills, but it didn't really matter because Ring Core and Super both go for 30. They beat Optic. Optic wins S&D, which is pretty interesting. And then they went Overload. Miami ends up winning both hard points in a series, which does not happen against Optic very often. But they win 250 to 249, as close as you can get it. And then they force a game 5 where Optic wins. So I would love to see the stats on the last time that Optic has won both S&Ds and lost both hard points in a series. Like that does not seem like a common occurrence for any iteration of Optic. But regardless, Optic wins this. They improve to 3-0 on the year, and Miami loses another match. What did you think of quite a back and forth series between two teams that I personally believe are, among the top 5?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway for me was obviously that, if Miami was able to hang with Optic, that are definitely improving in their practice. Like, this was a team after the first week, it was only one match, but we were saying, like, it seemed pretty clear uh, in their first showing that they were still trying to get to come to grips with how to play with Trakes and, just being a new team and all that stuff. But if you're able to go toe to toe with a team like Optic here after limited practice beforehand, like obviously whatever they were doing leading up to this match paid off in terms of getting those hard point wins, and that's something we've talked about historically. Like, when new teams are formed and stuff, they are practicing hard point more, and that could lead to some struggles in S&D. But given the success of Miami and S&D last year, it just feels weird to me that Optic was able to pull off the Neslo here. But hats off to them. Merc has absolutely just been frying in Search and Destroy this year. Went 10-6 map 2, 12-5 in the map 5 on raid again. So maybe raid is Merc's home, and we made the joke about him being young and not playing it before, so not gonna waste time doing that again. But yeah, this was a pretty banger of a series, especially given the circumstances for Miami heading into it. Definitely one where I don't think many people were expecting Miami to win a map, let alone both hard points. Map 4 definitely was a winnable map for Optic, and it probably shouldn't have went Miami's way, but credit to them. They made a really impressive comeback. So yeah, I think Miami is in a good spot, all things considered, heading in to the break. That they did end up playing another map, so we'll match.
Yeah.
So we'll talk more about them. But this was definitely one where I was like, yeah, good for Miami. They're in a good spot, even if Trakes individually isn't putting up superstar numbers or anything like that. Give him some time, and the other guys around him are playing pretty well and enough to contend with the quote unquote top dogs. So I would say the fact they lost both S&Ds is just weird to me. But again, when you put it into the context of potentially the practice regimen and all that stuff, I'm not worried about Miami in Search and Destroy, just given what I saw from them last year once Super joined that team. So interesting in the grand scheme of things how it all worked out. But like you said, Optic getting another win. I will say, Shotzi, I don't want to harp on it because obviously that's Ake's thing,
Yeah.
but Shotzi has had some pretty lackluster performances this year. Very early on, I'm not raising any red flags or getting super worried or anything like that, but it's enough to warrant a reaction from me, just in the sense of like, it's not one bad map and we go from there. It's been a couple times where he's struggled, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's just a case we talked about it early on. Like, it felt like this was like a do it all AR, and that goes against Shotzi's in your face SMG play style. But I'm not worried about him. He'll definitely figure it out. And if he feels like he's struggling, like he'll probably go hard off stream and put in the work to grind. So, but we'll have to keep an eye on him and see because if Optic's still flawless with him struggling, imagine just how much more scary they'll be if he hits final form.
Yeah, this is just a really tough series for the subs in general because Ring Core and Super 1.3 and 1.06, Dashy and Merc 1.15, 1.3. Every other player had a 0.85 or below. I would just imagine this is a really frustrating series for all the subs involved. But yeah, Optic wins, and they remain undefeated. Vancouver and C9 we did talk about already, but we should touch on anything more you want to say on C9, obviously, because this is their first win as a roster, if I'm not mistaken, and they didn't have like great performances last week.
They just played Minnesota last week, right? Or did they play 2 matches last week?
Let me look it up. They're 1-2 now.
Yeah, so they just played Minnesota last week. So
Yeah.
we'll talk more about C9 because they play against Miami and we talked about them. So, but this was another series where, like I said, Gwyn map 1, 42 kills for the loss, 32 kills for the loss, and the map 3 overload it's just tough sledding for him, and it's just seems to be a common trend where Gwyn's putting up the numbers and his team's not getting the results. But if Vancouver was going to pull off a win early on, I think this is a winnable match. But this was the case I made very early on, where I feel like if Vancouver can improve, they can be a team that is better than C9. But early on, I expected C9 to be better, just because of some of the names on that team and expecting them to find some success early on, and whether they will be able to sustain that is going to be the question for the C9 squad. But Beans, it might have been in this next series, but Beans was putting on a bit of show with a sniper in S&D, so that's something we'll have to keep an eye on for C9.
Yeah, I think I said with Vancouver specifically is that they don't really have a very easy rest of the Major 1 qualifiers. And granted, they'll have, I'm assuming they'll have not as much practice time as you would think because of the holidays and stuff. But they very realistically are not going to win a match in these Major 1 qualifiers. Their first match after the break against Boston is like a possibility, or maybe beating Miami, but they're not going to be favored in any of those matches, even against teams that you think are pretty winnable. So it'll be interesting to watch. Sunday, December 14th, we had Boston versus the Falcons. You said a winnable series a moment ago. This was a very winnable series for Boston. They kind of let the second hard point just slip away, and it was really interesting series. It did make us correct in our prediction that Falcons would go 2-0 this week. And I think if they had gone 0-2, we're having a much, much different conversation about this team, like as like an existential thing. But now that they went 2-0, how much relief is there, or how much more confidence do you have in the Falcons moving forward?
I just think this showed they aren't a top 4 team, but they aren't a bottom 4 team, because they struggled in week 1 against the quote unquote top teams, and they were able to pick up wins against other teams not in the top. So they're a middle of the pack team, and I think I think a lot of people, for whatever reason, in the early season power rankings and stuff, had them like 7th or lower, like at most. I think I saw them at 7th for a lot of people, or at best. I think they are in contention for the 5th or 6th spot. Like they just have they got 3 world champions on their team, MVP caliber players, all-star players. And it's going to be a question of whether they're able to put it together or not. The big thing in this series, unfortunately, as is tradition, almost every year feels like with Cell, was being accused of snaking, and there's back and forth. Cell saying that Boston was using a smoke in map 1, and then after that, Cell just let the snakes rip, and some of the reactions were pretty funny. Like they were counting in, and like even on Scump Watch Party, they're like, "That's 6 pumps." Like this is crazy.
It's out of bounds.
Um, but yeah, that's always been the problem with snaking. I'm not getting into that just because we've talked about it over the years. It's so hard to self-police it and stuff. What is a snake? What isn't a snake? Yada yada. In this case, it was pretty blatant that Cell was just doing it to do it. But snaking or no, like you know, Falcons got the win here. Boston is seemingly pretty frustrated about it, but I don't know if that's like the only reason why Falcons were able to win. Now there could be ramifications from that that could factor into how Falcons round out these qualifiers if like they throw the red card at Celium and are just like, yeah, you're not getting scrims when we get back from the holiday break. Like, how will that impact this Falcons team?
That's
That's
true.
to be determined. Um, but yeah, I think end of the day that this was 6-1 in the search, but outside of that, it was 3 pretty close maps. I think the Boston teams got that potential to be a middle of the pack squad, and Falcons I think is just slightly above. Or, we talked in years past about like when it was the 4 teams at the top, and then who's that 5th spot to be the gatekeeper for the bottom 4 teams to make champs. Um, I feel like this Falcon squad has that potential to be the 5th or 6th best team. But right now, you got Optic, Gentlemates, LAT, FaZe, and Toronto all fighting for like a top 5. So maybe the fight for the 5th spot is a little bit tougher than in past years. But like that's where I'm envisioning this Falcons team if things go right. But as we saw in week 1, it could be a struggle for them against some of those better teams. So we'll just have to see how things develop for them. But like you said, they were able to go 2-0. Xted in particular went on a 10 spree to end their comeback on Colossus in that last map where the snaking was occurring. So that snakes or no, like Xnid's 10 spree is outside of that, but um, that's obviously the Xnid is the question mark with this Falcon squad, and if he's able to be a consistent force for this squad, that should only mean good things in theory. But yeah, we'll see if there are any red cards or ramifications from this whole sneaking ordeal with Cell.
Yeah, it was a big bounce back for Kismet this week. He dropped positive KDs in both of the series, and obviously, like he had one of his worst weekends in a long time last weekend, which different opponents. Like you're going up against like top 4 teams versus like potentially bottom 4 teams. I think Boston is probably the gatekeeper to like the top 8. Like they're the team that if you want to like consistently be in the winners bracket, that's a team that you have to beat. Where Falcons is probably like the gatekeeper to like the top 6. Like if you want to try to get into the LAT conversation, you're definitely going to have to beat Falcons to get there. But interesting match. I think Boston probably does have I don't know how much the snaking in general makes it, but I mean, this is a really close series. It was 4-3 in overload, goes to overtime, 17-point hard point win in the second hard point and in the first, but Falcons wins the second hard point after the comeback. So and if Boston had won, they would go into the break 3-0, which would be pretty amazing for them. They would definitely be feeling pretty good going into the big break. Miami versus Cloud9. We've talked about both these teams a little bit already, but very back and forth series. Like wasn't able to get like a good read on these teams because it was pretty decisive hardpoint win for Miami, relatively decisive S&D win, pretty decisive overload win for Miami, pretty decisive hardpoint win for C9, and then it goes to game 5 and Miami has a relatively decisive S&D win. So like the hard points get split, the S&Ds get split, and the overload just happens to go to Miami, and the Heretics get this win 3-2. Do you want to be the one to heap praise on Trakes as he's continuing the tradition of the Ninja Diffuse?
That I put it in the notes, and that was like my big takeaway for this series, honestly, was like it was in, so it would have been to make it 5. So round 8 of game 5, Trakes hops the bomb in a 4v4 situation. You don't see that often in professional play. Like, and I think somebody died on Cloud9, so it was maybe technically a 4v3. While Trakes was defusing, but like with Trakes defusing, it's effectively a 3v4 for Miami. They get that kill, so then it's a 3v3 if you want to get real technical about it, because Trakes obviously isn't shooting at anybody when he's defusing. But that's just a play you do not see that very often in pro Call of Duty, where someone's willing to hop the bomb in a 4v4. Like, a lot of ninjas you see are where the person going for the ninja is added man disadvantage already, and I was just like, that took guts, and it was definitely the highlight play for me so far, very early in Trakes' CDL career. So I like that, big fan of that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I put it down for the Scar Hardpoint map 4. Like, there really weren't any like wild stat lines or anything. Vivid and Beans both had 26 kills, and I believe that was the most kills. But it was like everybody was like within a few kills of one another, so that was just a weird map. Like, nothing really to take away from it, especially when it's like almost 100-point win.
Yeah.
Then the other search is like Beans popping off with the sniper. I think that's the one I was thinking of. He drops 13 kills in the Den S&D map 2. Rencor goes 32-17 in the map 1, which map 1 was kind of weird too, because Cloud9 was up over 30 points. They hit 138 to 102, and then after that they only score roughly 20 points. The rest of the map, it was all Miami from there. So this is a back and forth series, but kind of like you said, like they're splitting the mode, so I really don't have anything to, majorly take away from. I think this was an important win for Miami in the sense of
Certainly.
actually getting a win on the board, just
Mhm.
given everything they've uh, dealt with early on in the season, the visa stuff, potentially impacting practice and whatnot. So just the fact they're able to get a dub here probably means a lot to those Miami guys. Sets them up going into the break, and I expect Miami to be a strong team now. Going forward the rest of the way. The more work they put in, they should be able to figure things out. But this. For Cloud9, it's like one of those. I picked them for the pick 'em just because I thought they were going to be one of those teams that has a stronger than expected start, but
Mhm.
obviously here just not able to get the dub. But there were some things to take away, especially like I said, Beans with the sniper. The fact that they're splitting modes here, like it's not like a Carolina in the past where we're looking at them to only win searches or whatever the case may be. Um, so yeah, I think, maybe it's not all doom and gloom for Cloud9, but it's just not a case they really get the job done here.
Yeah, Miami's like you said, like they did really kind of need a win here to like go 0-3 before the break, which wouldn't be ideal. And this is like certainly the most winnable of the matches that they played so far, because they played Toronto, which is winnable, and Optic was very winnable, but like those are teams that you can see like, okay, like I can understand how they would beat Miami. With Cloud9, it's like you kind of need to beat a team like this to at least set yourself up for the winners bracket. Like after that, like who knows? But you certainly don't want to be 0-3 and go on this month-long break and then come back and have to win maybe 3 matches to 3 of like 4 matches to get in. So, but yeah, they are 4-2 in hardpoint. So they're 4-0 between Den and Exposure, and then they're 0-2 on Scar hardpoint. S&D, they're 2-4. They're 2-1 on Scar, and then 0-2 on Den, 0-1 on Raid, and then they're 1-2 in Overload. So interesting. I don't really know what to make of it, obviously, but Trakes had his best performance of his career so far, especially at hardpoint. He's been really struggling, but he was playing Toronto and Optic in hardpoint, which is not ideal to get your CDL career started. But he looked pretty good in parts of this series, and they pick up the win here. And then we finish out the a second week of the CDL season with a match between the aforementioned Toronto Koi and Vegas FaZe. So we both picked FaZe, but I was pretty excited about this match because Toronto is a weird team where I don't really believe in them to that degree. But FaZe is also a team that I'm not sure what to believe with them because they're not the FaZe that I'm used to and that I can just rely on. But this was a really back and forth series, like super crazy results if you look at it. Like the hard points, one's a 250, 231 hard point, and then FaZe absolutely crushes Toronto. They 100 point club them. They hadn't even won a hard point to that point in the season, and then they 250, 250 to 72 against Toronto. 2 S&D wins for FaZe, overload win for Koi. What are your takeaways from this kind of match where I don't know like really what to make of it?
Yeah, I mean, especially you mentioned the 250 to 72 hardpoint win. That's against the Toronto team we talked about last week. They went up 130 to something or 131 to 0 against Miami in map 1, their first series there. So it's not like Toronto is a pushover in hardpoint or anything like
No.
that. Um I really am not too sure what to think about this either because it's not a case where like FaZe wins the series by winning 2 S&Ds, yes, but they weren't like dominant search performances. It's a 6-5 and a 6-4. um so it's not like I can say like I can rely on FaZe in search. Like yes, they played well in the searches, well enough to get the win here, and they're 4-1 in search on the year, so clearly that's like a FaZe thing we've seen with past iterations. But it's not like, maybe it's just the case where like these FaZe and Toronto are closer than other people were considering. Like maybe that's the big takeaway here. It's just you see a 5 map series where the only map that wasn't close is the map 4, like a 19-point hardpoint map 1, round 11 search, 1 point win in the overload, and a 6-4 in the game 5. That maybe that's just the best takeaway here is that FaZe and Toronto are very close, and we could be set up for some really good battles between these two teams throughout the year. I thought one interesting thing, um, I was watching the Scump watch party for this map yesterday, and I noticed he said during the listen in of map 1 that he thought FaZe's comics were, quote, hectic as shit. And I put it down in the notes. I was like, gotta go back and listen to this to make sure he was actually talking about FaZe, and it was because it was during their listen in, and he just wasn't a fan of their comms during the listen in, and that could be something we have to keep an eye on. I just thought it was weird because obviously people have been vocal about like Celium's comms
Yeah.
in the past, and for Scump to mention this about a FaZe team that doesn't have Celium on it, and it could just be a factor. It's a new team, 2 duos playing with another new duo for the first time, like getting used to each other in game and how to communicate effectively and all that. Um, so the fact that it made Scump discuss their comms has me wondering maybe that's a factor in their hardpoint struggles early on. But then like when it gets to mode like search where like people are dead and not all talking at the same time, it might um it's going to be something that I will be paying attention to going forward, and I probably wouldn't have if I wasn't listening to the Scum Watch Party at that time. So maybe it's something, maybe it's not, but end of the day, I do think right now my feelings on this series are just banger series. Really, this is probably what people wanted from Paris LAT heading into this week, and instead of just a 3-0 20-minute slammage. But we got a really close series here to round things out heading into the holiday break, and I'll be excited if these teams square off more throughout the season.
Also, one of the things that I took away from this is like Simp is definitively one of the like front runners for MVP. Like he's in the top 3 or 5 or whatever in terms of MVP right now because he's been like awesome. And, he's been obviously really, really great for a long time. But there have
Yeah.
been games where it's like, okay, like he's doing well, but it's Celium who's dropping like 1.2s, 1.3s. Going into the break, Simp has the third highest KD of any player in the CDL. He's a 1.27, only behind Ghosty, which is he's leading the league at 1.137, and
Oh, that
Mercules.
helps. When...
Yeah, I mean when you drop a 2.15s, like it's like inflation. Mercules is at second with 1.33, and then there's like Dashy, Celium. They both have 1.2s, and then Nasty, Joe Deceive, Snoopy, Rincor, and Real to finish the top 10. So, yeah, I just wanted to shout that out because he performed well again. Um, he's been kind of taking on the slaying power in hardpoint, even though it really hasn't been working out for his team lately. But then he has a really great performance in the 100 point club of Toronto. So yeah, I think it's these teams are very interesting. They are very flawed teams for potential championship contenders, and I think that's something to keep an eye on. I would say a lot of the teams are flawed to this point. I would the only two teams that I don't really consider to be flawed, I guess, are Paris and Optic, because I just think they're like really great teams, and I'm sure people can point and say like, well, there is this thing, but I think in general those teams are a pretty clear cut and above everybody else, and we'll see where FaZe and LAT and Toronto are able to slot in after the break. But yeah, that about does it. I don't know if you had anything else. We're about an hour and a half in. Obviously, apologize for not doing this show yesterday. I was out of town. I got back in at like 11 p.m. And I was like sliding all over the road, which was a tad bit scary. But I had to get back for the podcast on Monday afternoon and to talk about these great Call of Duty matches. The only time we're going to be able to talk about CDL matches for like 5 weeks now. So Buck win. We hope to have some content over these next 4 or 5 weeks to kind of fill the gap before we get back into the CDL. I don't know, maybe Activision will announce that Call of Duty is dead and that they're being replaced by Aches' X Defiant, which is getting a resurrection or something. I don't know. Maybe that'll happen over the next few weeks, but we do appreciate you guys listening and watching. Our pick'em before we go. I went 8-1 this week. You went 7-2. I think the difference was the Miami match, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Miami Cloud9.
So that's the only difference in our wins this week. But we are both 14-4 going into the break. Trimmer still winless. But please like, subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I think we're closing in on 270 subscribers the last time I looked. You can follow us on Twitter at jbink with 2Ks, at Preston Byers, and the podcast tours at Ego Chall Podcast. Next show, not entirely sure, but that's why you should just follow the feed or the channel or wherever you're listening or watching, because then you'll just get automatically updated. It'll just be in your feed, and you won't have to worry about doing anything else. You can also follow us on Twitch. I always forget about the Twitch, twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. You can watch the streams live on Twitch as well as YouTube. But yeah, we'll be back sooner rather than later. We'll have a few shows, I imagine, before Christmas, and then a few after Christmas before we get back into the matches. But we appreciate you all tuning in, and I believe we had somebody in the YouTube chat, Manila Season. He said, hope you all doing well. Appreciate him stopping by, and appreciate anybody who's been like commenting on the YouTube channel, and a lot more views, relative to what we're used to on the YouTube channel. So I'm always appreciative of that. That does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yep. Like you said, thank you as always for all the support in whatever shape or form that does come. Just on the off chance we don't have much to talk about before the holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, all that good stuff. But yeah, maybe the next couple days, LAT will officially sign Alluka, and then we'll be back immediately to talk about all the ramifications and everything like that. So hopefully there's some stuff coming up soon that we'll have to talk about, but you'll just have to bear with us. We got back to our 2 show per week schedule just just in time for the holiday break to come and derail that. But should be smooth sailing once the matches kick back off. You're just gonna have to bear with us for a couple weeks, and you know hopefully you're busy celebrating with spending time with your families and all that stuff where you don't miss us too much. But yeah, I'm tired of talking and said enough for today. So thank you guys as always for all the support. And remember to send the chow.